Okay, so these are all the parts to the little Vickers machine gun, and that's the front and the back. So basically we'll roll a tube and then we'll put those front and backs on. Now to cut those circles out, what I ended up doing was using my little punch and die set, and I just found the approximate right size hole, and you just slide that little piece between the plastic and the metal base, and you got to be really careful. You got to sort of line it up just so, but with a little practice it's easy. And then you grab your little piece that's gonna, your little punch itself, put it through the plastic hole, and then you drive it through with an appropriate implement of destruction, and then that cuts the paper out pretty cleanly, pretty nicely. I'm just taking my time here because it's imperative that you get it pretty dang close. So you stick your little pin in there, and then you hit it with something. In my case, any tool can be the right tool. I used a pair of pliers. Just a few taps is all it takes, and you'll feel it drive through, and there's one. And you flip it around, and you do the other one. I then colored the edges. You can see the little white outlines, so my little die set's actually a little bit large, but I knew from experience that that wouldn't matter. So I colored the edges. Now I'm coloring the edges of everything else. This is the gun breech. With silver, and this is putting the gun breech together. There's, I think, 4 pieces that go together, and 2 colored outline pieces, and then a couple pieces in the middle, and it makes a pretty thin breech, but it looks scale when it's done. So those just get put on one side. Actually, I think it's just 1, 2, 3. Well, in any event, you just line those up, put them on, make sure the edges, of course, get colored, but that's your gun breech. And that's where the barrel will attach to in the front end. Just make sure it's nice and square and everything is perfect, which it is in this case. And then I'm putting on the other side. So a little bit more glue. You grab the other side with a pair of tweezers or your X-Acto blade. And then you just slide that on in place, and you end up with a nice gunmetal looking breech. Now this is sort of the ammunition part that's going to fit, that the gun's going to fit to, and then that goes into the sort of a chute that goes into the, would have gone into the fuselage somewhere. But it's a kind of a weird shape. There's a lot of things to sort of bend to make it fold, to crease to make it fold. But there's a curved piece there, and that part's going to fit right down over that crease, or over that curve. And you add a little glue and you slide it over, and this is just a lot of fiddling around, making sure, again, you pre-fold things and pre-shape them. And there I've got it almost finished, and you just add glue as you go, putting these little tabs together. And as you look at your particular model, you'll see how they're supposed to go together. It's a little bit of head scratching, but they tend to, once you realize what you're trying to do, they fold together really nice and they make sense. At first they're kind of confusing, but then once you do it, it's okay. That last little piece to fold down there and squish it down, hold it, and now I've got this little piece that's the chute, and you just got to make sure it looks okay, which it does. It's square. It looks really good in this case. That glue is wonderful because it holds just enough to get tacky quick, and makes really nice. Now here's the barrel, and so what I did with this case, I took my little old mouse pad and I rolled it with several different sizes. First I used just a little paintbrush, and then I went to a little file. I'm just going little tiny smaller little bits and pieces. And then I'm putting a fair amount of pressure and rolling, and that will give it an even deeper, tighter curve. The other thing I did with this was I sanded the actual piece of paper down with sandpaper, because my cardstock I used is a little thick and it would have creased and been really horrible. So I actually thinned it out, so now it's pretty thin and it makes it roll easier. And then now I got a little piece, I think 1/16 piano wire that I use for some flying model stuff, and I roll that one, And again, roll it around, give it a fair amount of pressure, and you end up with something that's close to a cylinder. The idea is to get it, I mean, ideally you want to get it so that it actually folds all the way around and you got the perfect cylinder. In my case, I get sort of antsy and I get it close, and then I take my tweezers, and as long as I can hold it together and dry it and look okay, it's going to be fine. The length of this barrel is about the longest length you can do this with. Then if you get something longer like oleo struts for landing gear and stuff for World War II airplanes, you need to roll these things a little different. Maybe I'll show at some point how to do that. Learned that from another Polish site. Anyway, you put some glue on that tab, and then you go ahead and grab with your tweezers and fold over. Again, just a little bit of glue will do, because this glue does dry fast, and it does tack up quick, which is great. So I fold that one in. I'm kind of twisting the tweezers as I go, and then I grab the open end and squish it down onto the tab, and then I take off my excess and I just hold it there for a few seconds, and it dries in a thrice. And then this part, there's this little edge that I cut out, and that just rolls along this barrel to give this extra little sleeve on the outside. And this rolls all the way around, fits real nice. You kind of grab it, touch it with your finger, and then roll the barrel as you go. And that squishes right down nicely. And just make sure that it's tight, make sure that it's clean, make sure that it's level. And there's the barrel. Now sometimes they don't come out perfectly symmetrical and they look a little oblong. You look at them on the end. So what I do is I'll take something like the end of something like that and roll it around on the inside. But there are the basic pieces. Now what I'm doing is adding the front piece where the barrel will stick out. We'll use a piece of pulled sprue for that later. But this piece goes on, and the little white dots where the barrel's going to come through, you make sure you line that white dot up with the bottom seam, because that's the bottom of the barrel, bottom of the barrel, that's funny. That's the underside of the barrel. And you just make sure that lines up with that seam, because that's going to go down on the fuselage, so you won't be able to see it, which is good. Now I'm taking the breech and I'm putting some glue on the end. It takes a while to get this right. That's why I do this multiple times. Too much is going to be too much. And what I do is I'm gluing this to the other end of the barrel this way instead of putting it on the barrel itself, because this has a really nice little cutout, or not cutout, but a little rectangle on the printed piece that shows you where the breech is supposed to go. And it's nicely done. It's really well done in the kit. So I just decided I'll put that on, get that on there and glued, and then I'll add the barrel later. Just to make sure. So here I get that open a little bit more, make sure it's circular. And now I grab this thing, making sure again my white dot is down. I try to remember how I'm holding that. Put some glue on the end, and then go ahead and slide this thing, or put this thing onto the end of the breech that has the cap on the other side. You could put the cap on beforehand and then put it on. That would be fine. I just thought this might make more sense for some reason. So I grab my breech and I go ahead and just pop that on. You got to make sure again it's symmetrical. It's actually touching the little round piece up and down. The barrel itself should be raised a little bit above, like that. And that looks like a pretty dang good little Vickers machine gun. The printing again really makes it look amazing, in my opinion. It looks really good. Now that little white patch is where the little ammunition chute goes, the feeder. And you can see on this feeder, it's hard to tell. There's actually numbers on there. One of them relates to the number that goes to the machine gun. One relates to the number that goes onto the body. And this is the part that goes in the body, and you just put some glue on there, and you pop it right down on top of that white little square, little rectangle. And then I just eyeballed it to make sure it looked okay so that the other part would be vertical. to attach to the little machine gun. Now this is the part that's going to attach to the machine gun itself. There are two little nubs on the breech back there. There's one there and there's one towards the back right there that I put a little dab of glue on. And then I can just put that whole kit and caboodle right up against that magazine feeder. And you know, it's amazing how good it looks and how straight it was. I did a little adjustment. Again, you're trying to make sure everything looks straight and make sure everything looks even. And then I just popped the cowling on just to make sure it fit. And dang, if it didn't fit beautifully right under there. Gun looks great. It's gonna really look good. A couple of times I had to adjust it or fiddle around, make sure it's straight and true, but overall it looks wonderful. So I was very pleased. It was good to make sure that worked. So I hope you enjoyed this, and lots more soon.